because I have to read to somebody. Really do. To Hobbes, the summum bonum, or highest good in a commonwealth, was peace and tranquility. To Milton, it was progress and justice. Hobbes therefore preferred a static society at peace to a dynamic social order constantly in a state of internal dispute, which to him was merely another form of warfare. Hobbes would have established a strict censorship. He points out in Leviathan the danger of permitting liberty of discussion against absolute rule. Agitation carried on mainly by the very dregs of the people, stirred up by pernicious doctrines. Milton, on the contrary, believed that in a society aspiring to the just treatment of all its members, the dynamic internal warfare of ideas was indispensable. In the Areopagitica, he called for the open and respectful consideration and discussion of all new ideas, however strange or utopian. With the rush and tremor of an idealist on the verge of reality, he visioned all the Lord's people rising to the stature and wisdom of prophets, meditating, searching, dreaming, forging a new England on the anvil of discussion and research. What he proposed was a national open mind to the restless tides of progress, the social creativeness of the superior few, the persistent reach toward a more humane existence. He wanted a society of intelligent social critics, constantly subjecting themselves in their traditional ideas, customs, institutions, to merciless, periodic evaluation. Milton preferred a peaceful, we may say democratic, settlement of internal dispute. If in this way the country could not resolve its conflicts, however, Milton believed that war was preferable to an unnatural peace. He consequently threw his whole support into the struggle against the king, believing that reformation, not only religious, but political and economic, might be a glorious outcome of civil conflict. In his middle years, Milton believed, as we know from the Areopagitica, that the fearless collective search for truth by a whole energetic people would inevitably give birth to a new England of humane manners and sober, intelligent citizens. From ideas would spring the magic laws, from laws, collective action, reformation. In this machinery of national salvation, Milton was to be only gradually disillusioned. Even the annihilation of kingship and lords, the establishment of a republic, and the rise of the virtuous dictator Cromwell did not beget the New England of Milton's dreams. In the chaos that followed Cromwell's death, Milton began to hope again that the banishment of political superstition might prepare the way for a republic less autocratic and more enlightened than the old. Still, he hoped that intelligence would triumph. Still, he believed that the magic of his own pen might revive the good old cause. He little guessed how feeble was his voice, how little the liberal ideology of his fellow Puritans had sapped the vitality of England's devotion to the manners and pageantry of kings. When the Restoration was imminent, Milton set his face against the onrushing tide of monarchy. He hoped that the light he possessed might yet dispel the general darkness. Though the pervading tone of the ready and easy way is one of frustration and despair, Milton still projected the intellectual redemption of his fellow citizens. He proposed as a chief requirement that the new government assure its support of religious liberty, to Milton an intellectual freedom more precious than any other. At the same time, he recommended the establishment of schools and academies in every county, wherein the children of the citizens may be bred up in their own sight to all learning and noble education, not in grammar only, but in all liberal arts and exercises. To this a free commonwealth could easily assent, but monarchs never. Such a plan of education, continued Milton, would soon spread much more knowledge and civility, yea, religion, by communicating the natural heat of government and culture more distributively to all extreme parts, which now lie numb and neglected. Only the shock of the Restoration brought home to Milton fully the failure of intellectual freedom and the dissemination of Commonwealth principles as the way to national salvation. In no other year of his tumultuous middle life was Milton's soul merged with the good old cause so irrevocably as in the year of its doom. He would still speak for freedom, though only the stones might hear. I was sure I should have spoken to only the trees and stones with the prophet. O earth, 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 to tell the very soil itself what her perverse inhabitants were deaf to. In the struggle for a more humane and intelligent world, Milton had thrust the deepest hidden energies of his indomitable spirit, never for a moment renouncing the common goal or rejecting the duties of the citizen for the fulfillment of the poet. But now, with the return of Charles, all his hopes crumbled. This England, that might have been a paradise, was lost. Upon the heads of his countrymen he can invoke then in his great epic only the just wrath of omniscient Jehovah. Redemption by intelligence had receded into oblivion. To Hobbes, however, the Restoration was an unmixed blessing, bringing with it the friendship of the king and justification of his theories of society. The utopian efforts of the Puritans had brought only chaos, to Hobbes the worst of all evils. Order, now restored, apologists for absolutism came forth and added their voices to those of Hobbes. Though condemned by both royalist and republican theologians, Hobbes was easily the foremost protagonist for the absolutism of Charles II. His philosophy is pervasively insistent, as Professors Bredvold and Teeter have shown, in the drama of the Restoration. Dryden's acceptance of divine right, though theoretically contradictory to Hobbes' position, assumed Hobbes' subservient and unwavering support of kingly authority. However tyrannical, when Dryden observed regretfully that the rich grow suppliant and the poor grow proud, he implied, as Hobbes did, a calm preference of ancient and persistent inequalities to social uncertainty and agitation. Hobbes' influence has been pervasive and profound, not only on the thinkers of his day, but upon the political theorists of later generations. Nowhere does pessimism about the man and his future find more support than in Hobbes. Nowhere does the pessimist find all his arguments so completely documented, or the hopes of the idealist so thoroughly refuted. Mussolini's article on fascism in the Italian Encyclopedia, says Professor Gooch, is unadulterated Hobbes. This is less a tribute to Hobbes than a recognition of the tough realities that Hobbes has superlatively painted. He set his face not only against the Puritans, but against the whole impetus of Renaissance hope and inquiry, the printing press, meanwhile, multiplying by millions of minds those hopes that Hobbes thought most irrational. In deploring both the translation of the Bible and the reading of the classics, Hobbes rightly denominated two of the most destructive forces the Renaissance had set in motion. To him, free inquiry among the ignorant could bring only instability and confusion.